folks. I don't know what happened. It just kicked me off like that. I don't know what was happening, but I'm back. Welcome, welcome. So I need to finish the point I was making, right? I don't know what that was about. Usually it freezes. This time it just kicked me off. I don't know what that was about. But please, someone post the link to this in the link to the other one, please, so we can continue this conversation. Don't know what happened. YouTube is being weird. Darn Apple phone. But anyway, I was making a point. So a lot of the mass marketing that communists used to build their mass movement, even, mainly the Second International, not even the Comintern, but before that, the use of the color red, which is a color associated with passion, salute, having your salute, you know, you know, person with a distinct mustache on the poster. A lot of this stuff, fascists just kind of knocked off from the communist movement. The beliefs were not the same. But a lot of the techniques used to mass market their product were knocked off from the same movement. So that happened. So one in particular thing that it appears that the fascists took from the communists was this appeal to youthful rebellion. The fact that Hitler marketed himself as someone who didn't get along with his father, was kicked out of his father's house, right? The fact that the Nazis had this youth obsession, the Iron Youth, right? This was something. This was just something that that was an effective thing to do to psychologically appeal to people's rebellious nature. So it seems that after the Second World War, and this is where it gets interesting, after the Second World War, when they were doing all kinds of studies into mass marketing and all of that, Western culture seems to have realized that youthful feelings of rebellion are a great way to sell products. And they were doing all kinds of experiments in the aftermath of the Second World War about marketing, trying to figure out all kinds of things. You can read about, there's the famous milligram experiment. There's all kinds of stuff. And yes, people are still joining us. Please, link us from the old chat. Get people here. But after the Second World War, it seems like Western capitalist culture picked up on the fact that both communism and fascism had hijacked youthful rebellion sentiments. Thank you, Kinky, for putting the old link. And it seems to me, that basically up into the 1960s, you have a hijacking of youth rebellion sentiments among Western media. Neon Noir is asking, what is it with you and technical issue? I don't know. We went quite a long time before we had any issue, and then it just kind of plunked. But it seems like Western culture, and mass marketing and corporations and media and Hollywood picked up on the fact that both communism and fascism had this appeal to youthful feelings of rebellion. And it seems like, based on that, they strategically started using it for their own ends. And in the 1960s, the generation gap became this obsession. The generation gap, you look at books from that time period. There was like a best-selling book called Growing Up Absurd. And there was all this stuff that was written about youthful rebellion. The young people have different values than their parents. They're a new generation with a new worldview. All this stuff was written kind of glorifying youthful rebellion. And the 1960s anti war movement was very much framed as the young people standing up against the old fogies and fuddy duddies. And in a lot of ways, rock and roll music was marketed, Hollywood movies were marketed, clothing was marketed in this kind of young people versus old people formula. And the new left, you talk about the new left, right? We know about the 1950s coming out of McCarthyism. You still had the Communist Party, it was very weak. You had the Socialist Workers' Party. And so the new left was synthetically created in an attempt to try and keep young people that were protesting the Vietnam War and protesting for civil rights from joining the hard left. So, you had the Institute for Policy Studies that was created. You had the Congress for Cultural Freedom program of the CIA. You had United Auto Workers set up Students for Industrial Democracy, which eventually became Students for a Democratic Society, which was the main anti-war activist group. UAW, United Auto Workers, at that point banned communists from membership and was working with the CIA to run trade unions around the world. That's a whole other story, but the Solidarity House and all that. So the New Left was basically set up to counter the existing communist parties. It was set up, it was funded, a lot of CIA money went in to try and getting young people that were becoming left wing to not be tankies. And in order to do that, this generation gap stuff became really essential. This generation gap mindset became very, very essential into what was being pushed. And part of what was wrong with the Communist Party and the Socialist Workers' Party and all the old communist parties, they're a bunch of old fogies and fuddy-duddies, but it's the young people that'll save the soul of America. Right? And if you look at Jerry Rubin, right? Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, those are two individuals, one from New York, one from Berkeley, who basically became the spokespeople for the radical anti-war movement. And both Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman were very, very into this generation gap rhetoric. Very into it. They were very into drugs, which was also something being promoted by the CIA with their MK Ultra program. It was being distributed on college campuses and elsewhere. And the generation gap stuff was very, very widely promoted. But what's also interesting is that it's not so simple, because Mao in China, the Cultural Revolution was being waged, and it was also having the same kind of message. The Cultural Revolution in China presented itself, as the young people of China rising up to restore the communist principles against their parents that had, sold out, and that youthful rebellion, the politics surrounding youthful rebellion, the emotions that are hijacked for youthful rebellion, this is all something that has been used in politics. The 20th century, from the Bolsheviks up into the fascists and the anti-war movement and consumer culture, the Red Guards and the Cultural Revolution in China, the creation of youth movements, and hijacking youthful sentiments to rebel against one's parents has been a big factor in global politics. However, what I also think is interesting is if you watch Fox News, especially during the Obama years, you watch Glenn Beck, they almost did the opposite, right? The Fox News viewers tended to be older. A lot of advertisements for Viagra, a lot of advertisements for stair climbers. And what I noticed was in the aftermath of the financial crisis, it seemed like the conservative crowd was very much doing the opposite. Suddenly it was young people were the problem, right? It was like, well, these young people, they don't understand how to work hard. There's no economic problem. It's just these young people are lazy. They can't get their lives together. You know, these young people are, and it was austerity was being waged in the name of young versus old, but it was the old folks that were for it, right? These young people whine and complain. They get everything handed to them. The anti-millennial sentiment was really coming from the right wing in the United States. Like, young kids are a bunch of bums. We've all heard it, right? The stereotypes about young people. And young people in the United States, I will say, they have a lot of problems. And Obama very much, tried to, he wasn't appealing to feelings of youthful rebellion, but he was making a big point of young people are getting involved in his campaign. Do you remember that? Obama was really playing up the idea that he was the young person's candidate. Young people like Obama, right? They had Obama Girl, and, there was a lot of young people rallying around Obama. And so then the right wing kind of picked up on this, young people are all a bunch of lazy bums, and that's because they're socialists, because they want everything for free. And so, like, that was the argument. But now, it's taken an interesting turn because everyone knows that it was old folks that elected Donald Trump. That's a fact. Everyone knows that. I mean, it was elderly folks in Rust Belt states that went out and voted for Trump because they're bitter, they're angry, they've seen the economy go to hell. They're angry and they voted for Trump. But to be fair, old folks also voted for Bernie in big numbers too, right? Bernie, I mean, it's not that simple. Young people like Bernie too, but there's a lot of older folks. So it's complicated. But this generation gap stuff, it's interesting. It's marketing, and it's not really about ideas, I don't think. And you'll notice Greta now is kind of doing the opposite. Greta Thunberg is kind of doing the opposite of what the Obama era conservatives were doing. The Obama era conservatives were saying all these young people want everything for free. We need austerity, and these young people are a bunch of lazy kids who just need a good kick in the ass to get their life together. That was kind of the message, right? And we should have austerity, and these young people are a bunch of socialists and they don't get it. The message of Greta is almost, well, we need to have austerity because we live too comfortable lives, and these old people are destroying the future. And we are the young people that are going to have to live with the super hurricanes and the mass climate refugees and all the bad things that are going to happen. And the young people, the old people, by not accepting austerity, by wanting unlimited economic growth, they're the ones that are destroying our future. For goodness sakes, that's the argument. Interesting. Generation gap stuff. I don't really have a conclusion about this. I don't really have a conclusion about it, right? I'm not really saying anything about it. It's interesting to see how this has been used in the 20th century, far left, far right, mass marketing, media. Now we're seeing this play out in the United States. We're seeing it play out with Greta and the yellow vests, and it's very interesting. Very interesting stuff. That's all I can say. What else is on people's minds, folks? What else is new? See someone calling themselves the Daily Bolivarian. Says, hi, Caleb. Well, hi back to you. Yeah. Ecuador, there's protests going on, right? This new president in Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, has just been kind of dismantling the socialism set up by Rafael Correa. The people are out in the streets protesting against him. Quite exciting stuff. I mean, let's see what happens. Yeah, very interesting. I think it's fascinating stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Now, it's interesting, folks. Now, so I restarted doing the live after it just kind of kicked me out. I don't know what that was about. Um, but now it says there's only 11 of you watching. And I have a feeling that's not true. What number are you all seeing? Interesting stuff. Talked about the protests in Iraq earlier before we restarted. Yeah, now people are saying 80. I'm seeing 11. That's pretty bizarre. So tell you what I'll do, folks. I'm thinking that before we go, I might want to read you all something from the new book. All right, this is my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. Selling a lot of copies. People are reading it. And I figured before I go, I might as well read you something from the new book. But I'm not sure what I want to read you. So why don't people in the chat make suggestions? What should I read from the new book? For those of you who have the new book, who've read the new book, what would you like to hear me read? What would you enjoy? I have an idea, but I'm open to other things. Who has a suggestion of what I should read from the book? Any suggestions for those of you in the chat? I'm looking at what people are saying here. It says chapter 5. Okay. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm just curious as to what I should read. I have a couple ideas about what to read. Sharon Pitts, thank you very much. Petro-socialism in Scotland, says Kinky. Well, that's an interesting chapter. I could read that. Tell you what. I am going to read an essay that is published in this book. It's an essay I wrote. It was published on a website. I published it in this book. It's on page. Since Kinky wants the page number, I will give it. It is on page 332. I will read you this essay. It's the beginning of section 5. It's this essay I wrote called Chaos from Above and the Crisis of Geopolitics. The traditional aesthetics of left and right are lost in the unfolding confusion of the 21st century. Wall Street bankers and the powerful entities on the London Stock Exchange, the Silicon Valley elites, speaking to us through CNN, Facebook, Twitter, and every high-tech mechanism for molding opinion, are screaming revolution. The Arab Spring seemed to be the opening explosion, and the fallout from that geopolitical disaster continues. Libya went from being the African country with the highest life expectancy and the most prosperous economy to its present condition as a failed state, with refugees fleeing and terrorists setting up shop. Syria has faced over a decade of civil war as Western-backed revolutionaries who beheaded children and bombed churches unleash hellish conditions in the hope of toppling a government led by Ba'athist Arab socialists. Western media now cheers for mobs of enraged students and armed extremists who work to topple the governments of Nicaragua and Venezuela, decrying popular elected Bolivarian leaders as dictators. Powerful voices from the Western world are screaming almost in unison, revolt. But revolt against what? For what purpose? What is the goal of this highly romantic but ideologically vague CNN-led revolution? No answer has been provided. It is as if the ghost of Leon Trotsky has shed his socialist aspirations and kept only his fixation for barricades and firing squads, and taken the helm of geopolitics. The nightmare playing out before our eyes is very much the consequence of Wall Street and London's new revolutionary impulse. Refugees are pouring into Western countries. Acts of terrorist violence are becoming far less infrequent. Among CNN's beloved revolutionaries in Syria and Libya, an entity called the Islamic State has emerged, utilizing all the media savvy that Hollywood and Silicon Valley has perfected to sell destruction. In reaction, among the less powerful sectors of European and American elite, a new right of anti-globalists and isolationists now calls for a retreat from the horrors of the global community. During the Cold War, the leaders of the NATO countries accused the Soviet Union of spreading chaos. They invoked memories of the Communist International and presented the Soviet Union as attempting to conquer the world under the guise of proletarian revolution. Yet today, the calls for revolution come from Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin. Those who oppose this call and champion stability and security are deemed to be fascists. Like most things, the roots of these bizarre political manifestations in our times can be found in economics. At the time of the Arab Spring in 2011, the primary issue was mass unemployment. Millions of rural, jobless people were piling into the urban centers of the Middle East, sleeping in graveyards and rioting for food. But joblessness and underemployment wasn't unique to the region. Jobless young Americans occupied Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan, after observing jobless Greeks and Spaniards occupying their universities and town squares months before. The computer revolution has forced the human race to remember the prophecies of Karl Marx. While Marx's call for glorious international workers' revolution may have been disappointed by his more scientific predictions, his more scientific predictions about the fundamental workings of the profit-centered economy are ringing truer than ever. Marx's close collaborator, Friedrich Engels, explained his comrade's basic, non-moralist critique of capitalism this way: "We have seen that the ever-increasing perfectibility of modern machinery is, by the anarchy of social production, turned into a compulsory law that forces the individual industrial capitalist always to improve his machinery, always to increase its productive force. The extension of the markets cannot keep pace with the extension of production. The collusion becomes inevitable, as this cannot produce any real solution so long as it does not break in pieces the capitalist mode of production. The collusions become periodic. Commerce is at a standstill. The markets are glutted. Products accumulate. As multitudinous as they are unsaleable, hard cash disappears, credit vanishes, factories are closed, and the masses of workers are in want for means of subsistence because they have produced too much means of subsistence. Bankruptcy follows upon bankruptcy, execution upon execution. The stagnation lasts for years. Productive forces and products are wasted and destroyed wholesale until the accumulated mass of commodities finally filters off, more or less depreciated in value, until production and exchange gradually begin to move again. Little by little, the pace quickens. It becomes like a trot. The industrial trot breaks into a canter. The canter turns and grows into a gallop of perfect steeplechase of industry, commercial credit, and speculation, which finally, after breakneck leaps, ends where it began, in the ditch of a crisis. This is the crisis of the 21st century. 3D printers churn out products that once required hundreds of industrial workers to produce, as fast food workers sweat on hamburger assembly lines with the short order cook as a distant memory. As fracking wells and deep sea drills extract more gas and oil than ever before. As online retailers close down shopping centers. As a vast globalized, high-tech apparatus of production rolls on, seemingly without workers, the overall standard of living is dropping. The millions who are left outcast and starving cannot even begin to purchase the huge amount of goods being so efficiently produced without them. The 2008-2009 financial crisis was rooted in attempts to solve an unsolvable problem with credit deregulation. The spending power of the global working class is dropping, while the efficiency of production has risen higher than ever before. The strength of Western governments during the Cold War came from an aristocracy of labor. The working class people of America, Britain, France, Norway, and Sweden, who enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, high wages, and thus were patriotic and loyal to the free world against the Marxist opposition. The construction workers, who beat up anti-war activists in the hard hat riots of 1970. The Archie Bunker base of militarism signified a strata of comfortable conservatives that was essential in maintaining order. But this strata is now fading away into nothing. The reality of a low-wage, service sector economy and a rising police state is replacing the white picket fence American dream of the post-industrial days. However, a different political and economic model is thriving. If one looks at Iran, Russia, China, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Syria, it is hard to find ideological consistency. These governments are secular, atheist, Catholic, Orthodox, and Islamic. They are nationalists, theocrats, Baathists, communists, and social democrats. Yes, in all of these countries, the state has taken control the centers of economic power. Russia reemerged from the nightmare of the 1990s with an economy centered around Gazprom and Rosneft, two gigantic state-controlled corporations. These were national champions controlled by state central planners functioning to serve the nation. In Iran, the largest entity is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, controlling major industries and vital resources. China's market reforms have allowed a large private sector to prosper, but at the end of the day, the party's control over the state-controlled banks and industries dictates production. Bolivarianism, Baathism, and other anti-capitalist theories from the formerly colonized world may be a deviation from the Marxism of Soviet textbooks. But all of the 21st century anti-imperialists are quite clear about who should control the means of production and why the rule of profits keeps the world chronically poor. As Western capitalism drowns in the high-tech market-spawned chaos, the societies where the state is strong enough to mobilize the population and control the economy continue to march forward. Slowly but surely. The Belt and Road from China, Moscow's Eurasian Economic Union, and other alternative economic structures have made it possible for nations to flourish without the IMF and the World Bank. Neoliberalism has reduced governments to the role of helpless bystanders amid economic catastrophe. But the concept of statecraft, which built civilizations, is alive and well across Eurasia. In huge sections of the globe, not gripped by dropping wages alongside endless iPods or homelessness amidst skyrocketing rent, the government is not keeping its hands off. In the rising alternative, the mantra is not the government that governs best, which governs least. Rather, the government is deemed best when it delivers the goods and advances the interests of the population. As farms sprout up across Russia's Far East, and the state-controlled steel industry of China grinds forward, despite Trump's tariffs, it is clear that the crisis of overproduction does not menace societies in which the economy is not free to choose. When the state has the power to direct economic activity and manage production, the irrational horrors of starvation amidst plenty can be abetted. The forces that dominate the crashing and burning global economy are not motivated by ideology. They seek to make profits, and the key to maintaining profits is monopoly. They seek a planet that can only function as a captive market, buying and selling only from them. Oil is central to maintaining this monopolistic power. The Wahhabi Saudi monarchy and its Arab vassal states, Africa's Niger Delta displaying poverty drenched in black gold, the fracking colonies of North Dakota, and the Gulf of Mexico's deep-sea oil rigs all function as tentacles of the Western financial centers. Chase Bank, ExxonMobil, HSBC Bank, British Petroleum, all see independent oil and gas producing states like Russia, Venezuela, and Iran as annoying competitors. If they suffer the same fate as Libya and Iraq, the profit margins will only expand. The real danger to the monopolist global order of Wall Street and London oil bankers comes from new technology. China's new energy vehicle laws made the mineral markets explode with demand. Fusion energy, artificial intelligence, supercomputers, hyperloop trains, all the hope for humanity made possible by the computer revolution spell the end of those who have cornered the oil market and the economy of the dying old world. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley attempts to control the information explosion that it has launched. Realizing that sooner or later social media and cybernetics will no longer be under their domination. Tightening their grip only expedites the process of the new world utilizing the new technology against the old world that created it. So what is their only hope? Chaos, revolution, regime change, destruction, deconstruction, disobedience, dysfunction, and maintaining underdevelopment. The only hope for staying on top of the mountain is to reduce the valley to chaos. In our bizarre postmodern civilization crisis, the emperors of a falling Rome are themselves dispatching the barbarians. The forces who once screamed containment and law and order now unfurl an ideologically cleansed banner of revolution in the hopes of tearing down any possible alternative or rival. Like the feudal preservationists who rallied around Robert Malthus, they talk of reducing the population to hold off the inevitable. Meanwhile, Hollywood movies churn out the repeated psychological rehearsals for the apocalypse. The only hope for the dying order is that history can be stopped by a wave of chaos and destruction. But history marches forward, regardless, and civilization has not surrendered. That is an essay that is included in my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. So you should order a copy. I hope you like it. It's been getting good reviews. And if you've read it and liked it, be sure to review it on Amazon. It's got great reviews on Amazon so far. We're doing good, folks. We're doing great. So unless there's anything else anyone else wants me to comment on, is there anything else people want me to talk about, I'm going to go. So what else is on people's minds? We need a government of action to fight for working families, says Alex Giovanni. And I agree. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Absolutely. Arthur Porter is mentioning Henry Winston. let me talk about Henry Winston. Henry Winston was an African-American leader of the Communist Party, right? Back in the 1930s, the Communist Party was really the only major political party that was opposing Jim Crow segregation, fought for the rights of African Americans, the Scottsboro Nine. They had an African American member of city council in New York City, Benjamin Davis. And Henry Winston was a member of the Communist Party. And when McCarthyism began, 1948, in the aftermath of the Second World War, he was sent to federal prison for being a communist. And in federal prison, he wasn't given proper medical care and medical attention, wasn't given proper nutrition, and he went blind. He was blinded by the U.S. government, basically, for being a communist. Horrendous case. But he was a strategically brilliant man. And I believe he was a leader of the U.S. Communist Party up into the 80s. You can watch big, long interviews with him. He was one of the smartest men in the Communist Party, tactically brilliant. And it's quite tragic and horrendous what was done to him in the 1950s. But yeah, I mean, Arthur Porter mentioned him. I think he's worth mentioning. I mean, he was a real, hero for the working class. And there's a pamphlet that he authored called like what the Communist Party stands for or something like that. Kind of an introduction to Marxism. It's interesting. There's a lot of very good pamphlets from the Communist Party in the 1950s, kind of explaining what they're about, what it means to be a communist. That's what it's called. Those kind of pamphlets are very good. I recommend them, those kind of writing. There needs to be more introductory material. And I think that, it's interesting stuff. But yeah. If folks haven't watched the talk that I gave in Brazil about how the oil markets function and how countries are kept in chronic poverty, how the international oil markets are controlled by capitalism, by Western capitalism and big corporations, how the price of oil is manipulated, you really ought to take a listen. 2016, I gave a talk in Brazil, and you ought to watch Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis, the talk I gave in English and Portuguese. If you want to learn what's going on in the world, you want to learn about the fight between the rich and the ultra-rich, you want to learn who really rules the world, you ought to check it out. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. Folks, ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. I'll say that one more time. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Folks, it's been a pleasure. Glad you're all here. And let's remember that we're a community. Right? We're all part of what we do here. This is all something special that we do, and you are just as much a part of this as I am. In fact, you're a bigger part of this as I am. If I was here just talking into a camera and no one was watching, not much would happen. You're more of a part of this than I am. This community is far, far bigger than just me. This is really something special that we're doing here. But you need to be a part of it. You need to share these videos. You need to promote this channel. I need you. Right? We need each other. We're a community here. We talk about all kinds of things. We'll try to figure out about getting some more control over the chat, maybe getting somebody, maybe dubbing somebody a moderator. They can take care of this stuff. But yeah, we're doing really great things here, folks. I'm glad we do these lives. Glad we have our conversations. And you're an important person. You're part of this conversation. I've talked before about how I love you all, right? I love the fans. I love the haters, and I love the lurkers. Right? Because I know a lot of people watch these conversations, whether they're watching now or afterwards. I love you all. I really do. And we're doing something pretty special here. We're having an important conversation. We're talking about ideas. I mean, hey, if you watch this thing from the beginning, talking about Oliver Cromwell, and we're talking about Mao, and we're talking about Apple, and we're talking about all kinds of stuff. This is not what you get elsewhere, right? This is a unique brand that we're doing here. We're doing something really special. We're doing the best we can. We're struggling for truth in a world of lies. We're trying to get out of the nightmare of pessimism that's gripped the planet. Revolutionary love to you all. Stay strong. I see Vivian Blush says she subscribed. Well, great. Glad to have a new friend, part of this community. Because we're doing something really, really special here. We're from all over the country. I'm going to be in LA October 18th. So if you're around, want to come join us, Ramiro posted the details about the event. We're going to have a great event out in LA. Stay strong, folks. We're doing the best that we can. And on that note, folks, I'm finished. Let's be in touch.